And today I'm just going to preach on a verse, and rather half a verse. And at the risk of making the title sounding boring, I think that this church is mature enough to understand the importance of the Word of God. And I don't think we need to have creative titles, although there are times for that. I just called it Continue in Prayer. So as we enter today, the last chapter, chapter 4 of Colossians, there remains a pending verse in the text regarding our conduct towards others. Last week, Pastor Patrick went over these instructions. Wives, be subject to your husband. That's what the Bible says. Doesn't matter what the feminist movement says. Wives, be subject to your husbands, and all that within parameters of godliness. Husbands, love your wives. Children, obey your parents. Fathers, do not provoke or irritate your children. And that's where Pastor Patrick stopped at the end of chapter 3. We begin now in chapter 4, and it says masters. And it tells the masters to be nice to their slaves or their servants. Deal with your slaves justly and fairly, knowing you have a master in heaven. And Paul seems to apply the golden rule here. Now remember, slavery in the Bible was not like slavery in the United States back last century. Slavery in the Bible was a type of survival. People with no money, no jobs, no future would go to someone who was wealthy, who had an estate, and they would sell themselves and say, if you give me food and if you give me a place to stay, I will work for you. It wasn't slavery as we know it. And Paul is telling them, you need to be nice to your slaves. You need to be nice to your servant. Now, he goes from there maybe to teach us how it is that wives are subject, or husbands love, or children obey, or fathers do not provoke. And he tells us, he shows us how to do three things. Today I'm just going to talk about one thing. He shows us how to pray, how to walk, and how to talk. And our verse today is this, Colossians 2, continue in prayer and watch in the same. That's all I'm going to preach about this morning. Continue in prayer. But I've heard so much about prayer. Pastor, prayers, I'll pray for you. I'm saying prayers for you. Please pray for me. It sounds so redundant and boring. But why does Paul put this down in his letter? Why does he register it? Why does he invite the church and instruct the church and remind the church to continue in prayer and watch in the same? Prayer is the most important speech that your mouth will ever utter. Prayer is the most important conversation that you will ever hold. Prayer is the most important expression of the new life of a Christian. Prayer is the divinely appointed weapon against the sinister attack of the devil and his angels. Prayer is the vehicle for confession of sin. Prayer is the means by which the grateful soul pours out its spontaneous praise before the throne of God. Prayer is the voice of the weeping soul calling on the sympathetic high priest in the time of need. Prayer is the intercession of the concerned Christian who calls on divine resources on behalf of another's trouble. Prayer is the simple conversation of the beloved child with the caring father as they talk in love. Continue in prayer. The ESV Bible says, continue steadfastly in prayer. The Amplified Version says, be focused and devoted in prayer. The Common English Version says, never give up praying. Now let's look at that word continue. Continue in prayer. The word in Greek is kartier, which means strong. This is an interesting word. It comes from a noun that means strong. The verb means to be steadfast, to endure, to hang in there, to don't stop. That's kartier. But the word used here is pros kartier. And whenever you put the preposition pros in front of a Greek verb, you intensify the word or the verb. So he's saying if the word cartier means to be strong and steadfast, this means pros cartier means to be super strong and super steadfast and to really hang in there. It's the idea of perseverance. It means to be super persistent. We're talking about something that's important to God, that the church will continue in prayer. Persistence defined, continuing to do something or to try to do something, even though it is difficult or other people want you to stop. Continuing beyond the usual, expected or normal time, not stopping or going away. What else does the Bible say about prayer? In Luke 21:31, it simply says, pray always. In Acts 4:6-4, but we will give ourselves continually in prayer. In Romans 12:12, continuing instant in prayer. Thessalonians 5:7, pray without ceasing. Philippians 4:6, be anxious for nothing. Doesn't look like us, does it? It seems we're anxious for the final, we're anxious for the paycheck, we're anxious for the due bills, we're anxious for the sick child. It says, be anxious for nothing. So then what do? But in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. So Paul is instructing the church to be dogged, to be persevering, tenacious and pertinacious in prayer. And then it says, and watch in the same. Continue in prayer and watch in the same. What does watch mean? It means to stay awake, to stay focused, to don't fall asleep. We have a beautiful illustration of this in Matthew 26:36-45. And here I find a few stations of prayer. And you might want to decide where you find yourself in your prayer life. Do you have one? Of course, I'm speaking to the church this morning, but even our friends, do you have a prayer life? I guess we all have a prayer life, even an atheist. I assure you that if in 15 minutes the Los Angeles metropolitan area was shaken by an 8.5 earthquake, I believe that everybody would have a prayer life. Oh God, help me Jesus. And people kneeling on the streets calling out to God. But it doesn't say pray when there's an earthquake, or pray when there's been an accident in your family, or pray when the doctor says you do have stage 4 cancer, or pray when, yes, your son will receive 20 years in the state prison. It says pray, continue in prayer, and watch evermore. So here's the story. Then cometh Jesus with them to a place called Gethsemane. That word means an olive press. It's where the olive trees were. It's Gethsemane, and they would press the olives to get oil. It's a place of pressing. And he says to the disciples, sit here while I go pray yonder. So watch this. He has 12 men with him, 12 disciples, and him, 13 in all. So he tells them to sit here while I go pray yonder over there. And then, well, this is the place here. I was just there a couple days ago. That is the garden of the olive trees, or Gethsemane. These trees, give me the next one, please. These trees are dated, some of them 2,000 years. Very probable that Jesus may have prayed under one of these trees. It's a beautiful place. So then he sits 12 men down. He goes yonder, but before he goes, he takes with them 3 of his disciples, Peter, John, and James. He took with him the 2 sons of Zebedee, that's John and James, and Peter, and he began to be sorrowful and very heavy. The reason his heart is heavy is because in a few days they're going to crucify him. They're going to torture him on the cross. Sit here while I go pray yonder. And he takes with him these three. These three, you find various instances in the Bible where Jesus separates the 9 from the tree. He did it on the Mount of Transfiguration. He did it when he resurrected Jairus' daughter. There was always a separation. Just a title does not give you intimacy. There was something in these three that Jesus, that they had, that Jesus wanted to be close to him. Then he said unto them, unto the three. So he leaves 9 and he takes 3 and he says unto them, my soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry or wait ye here. So he's got some over there. He comes yonder. He tells the 3, I want you to pray here, you 3. The 9, he's not expecting for them to pray. He's not even dealing with him. But I want you to stay here and watch. That means stay awake. We're going to shake the foundations of the universe in a few days when I go to the cross. And all of heaven is waiting. And I need to pray to my Father. And I want you to watch with me. And he went a little further. So you've got the 9 over here. You've got the 3 right here. And then Jesus goes a little further to pray. He fell on his face. And these aren't instructions on prayer, but they are something that we can certainly learn from. I can pray standing, I can pray sitting, I can pray laying down if the circumstances call for that, but there's nothing like falling on our face in prayer. And he prayed saying, oh, my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. He was in anguish. He was about to enter into Calvary, into being crucified, into being tortured. And as a man, as a human, he was feeling all of that. On Easter Sunday, I'll tell you more. What hurt him more than the nails and hurt him more than the crown of thorns. There was something greater, far greater than tortured Jesus. I'll tell you that on Easter. I hope you're here. I hope you're here next Sunday too. And he went a little further. And he fell on his face. If it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. I'm going to do your will. I wish this would go over. I wish we can get done with this. I wish we didn't have to go, me as a man, but let your will be done. So he is in anguish. This passage, it's not going to explain to us like the Lucan and the John passage and Matthew passage tells us that while we prayed, drops of blood like sweat would come up. Jesus was in a compressor. He was in a Gethsemane. He was being pressed for you and I. You talk about stress. You talk about heaviness. You talk about something very important. And then after he prayed, he comes from where he was back to where the 3 were. And he comes to the disciples and finds them the opposite of watching. What is Paul's instruction? Continue in prayer and watch in the same. Stay awake. And it's not just being asleep with your eyes closed in bed. It's being asleep while I'm distracted. It's being asleep while I'm doing everything else. It's being asleep and not having a prayer life. For 35 years, I've talked to you about this. And it's so important that I must stick to the Colossians text and highlight this. And he asked Peter. Now, why Peter? There's 3 of them. There's James and John. It doesn't say he asked Peter, James, and John. He asked Peter. Was Peter their leader? Was Peter the one that should have been praying to? Because in a few days he was going to deny the master. He was going to go through the temptation of saying, I never knew him. He tells Peter, what? Just a simple question. Could you not watch with me an hour? If you can only do whatever you do in prayer, do it. But An hour is for a mature Christian. Try to work yourself up to praying at least an hour. 2 30-minute sessions, 1 hour session, 10 or 6 10-minute sessions, or 25 minutes, or 1 minute 60 times. I don't know. Just do it. Do it. I heard an old lady, pastor's wife, many, many years ago say, let me give you the most basic and simplest form of how to stay close to God, how to not backslide, how to stay in the way. And she gave these 3 very simple instructions. If you could do this, you'll make it to heaven. And I think it has a lot of truth in it. Pray an hour a day. Fast 1 day a week. And share your faith with those around you. If you do that, you're pretty much going to make it. And so he asked him, could you not? Guys, I brought you up here. I need you to pray with me. I'm going into the most important event of the universe. Can't you even watch with me an hour? Have you ever been watching Netflix? And the little sign comes out, are you still watching? That's that. Those of you that laugh, no, right? Because that's about after 3 hours. And there's no movement. All the potato chips are gone and the Cokes. And Netflix has to ask you, can you not watch with me at least 3 hours? An hour goes by like this. An hour is just, a year goes by, a month, an hour, when our hearts are filled with thanksgiving and praises to God. And I'm almost finished, really, kind of, maybe. But I want to talk to those who don't pray. And like running, you don't start running 5 miles. You're going to faint, you're going to fall, you're going to get sore, you're going to get sick. But you start walking and you start running a little and you start running a little more and you get in shape. Can I invite you to pray? There's a pathology here. There's something happening in his revisits. He tells them, watch and pray. Stay awake and pray. Stay focused and pray. Why? That ye enter not into temptation. So when somebody enters into temptation and is conquered by that temptation, it's an easy deduction that somewhere I stopped praying. Somewhere I stopped watching. I deal with confessions all the time, not like in the Catholic confessional, but just, Pastor, I've sinned, Pastor, this and that. And it always goes back to the root. I committed this last month, but my heart left the Lord 2 years ago. You could just go with the flow and sing the songs and come to the events and show up on Sunday, but my heart can be far from God. Be aware, be afraid. When you can go week in and week out. It's October, it's November, we're about to step into December, and I have not really prayed. Oh, sure, I'll pray for my meal, and even down to the little kindergarten rub-a-dub-dub. Bless the Lord for this grub. And sometimes that's our prayer. What does he do? He went away again the second time, Jesus. The 9 are over there. He knows they're asleep. But I had more. I was expecting more from these 3. He went away again the second time and prayed, saying, Oh, my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done. Again, agonizing, anguish, drops of sweat like blood. Those were the capillaries in his forehead and around his cranius, bursting with the pressure. And then he prays another hour, it would seem to me, or at least another while. And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. If we didn't have baptisms today, I would take about 20 minutes and talk about that word heavy. The heaviness that's all over. Notice verse 44, and he left them. The first time he says, can't you watch? Can't you stay up with me? Can't you pray 1 hour after all we've been through? After all you've seen? After all I've done for you and what I'm about to do for you? Can't you watch? And he left them and went away again. Be concerned when he doesn't wake you up anymore. Be glad when you feel a sense of guilt. Yes, of guilt. I haven't prayed today. Last night, we're getting ready for today, long day. After Spanish service, we're going to go open a church in Tijuana. I'll be preaching over there at 5 o'clock today. Got another FTC. And we're kind of jet lagged still. And then my wife's in her concern for my health. By the way, I'm already 42 or 45 or somewhere. Plus 20. She says, Sam, do you have to go this morning? Can't you rest? And I said, Rachel, how do I when I don't pray in the morning, it's like if I walked out of the house without my pants on. I can't. And he left them and went away again and prayed the third time. You say, yeah, but he was God, but he was also mad. If they're sleepy, he's sleepy. He's tired. Saying the same words. Then he comes back to the disciples. And this is the scary part. When he says, sleep on. Go ahead. Sleep on. I never want to hear those words from God. Sleep on. Sleep on. My mercy and grace used to have it, but sleep on. Now and take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. And so this is the duty of every Christian, to continue in prayer. Keep up your constant times of prayer. This is serious. This is not just a churchy teaching on a Sunday morning about prayer. No, this is life. This is our lifeline. Keep up your times of prayer without being diverted from it by other business. Keep your heart close to the duty without wandering, without deadness, and even to the end of it, watching the same. Christians should lay hold of all opportunities for prayer and choose the fittest seasons which are least liable to disturbance from other things, and keep their minds lively in the duty and suitable frames. What does that mean? Find a prayer time, find a prayer chair, find a consistent time when you pray. If you don't, start with 5 minutes. If you can do 5, move it up to 10. It'll soon, if you pray right, it'll soon blur into 30. And where at the beginning you're looking at your watch and it seems like an hour and the clock hasn't even moved 2 minutes. You say, oh my goodness, you're missing the connection. You don't have Wi-Fi. There's no connection. I tell you, I guarantee you, I promise you that when you connect, when your spirit connects, except maybe moms that have 2 or 3 kids in the morning that, we're not going to ask you to pray. We're going to pray for you. You just keep going. But the rest of us, can you get up a little early before you go to work? Can you sneak into your truck at lunch and spend 15 minutes with God? Continue in prayer, he says, and watch evermore. So if Jesus frequently took time to pray, who am I not to pray? Because the less I pray, the less I feel to pray. The less I pray, the less I want to pray. I've lived this. when for whatever reason, being trips, being business, being busyness, being active, being whatever, you slip a day, you slip 2 days, you slip 5 days, you slip 2 weeks, the less I pray, the less I want to pray. But the more I pray, the more I feel to pray, the more I want to pray. To not pray is like shoving a fist in God's face and saying, I don't need you. That's what happens when a Christian does not pray. It's like putting a fist right there. It's, I don't need you. And we all know we need him. It was my wife's grandfather, Antonio Contreras Luna, who I believe coined the phrase, unless he read it someplace and never told us. Much prayer, much power. Little prayer, little power. No prayer, no power. Men, FTC men. Don't just go through the church motions. You need to be connected with life. You've heard me say the illustration of the man who walks in the house. His wife is vacuuming. The couches are moved, the tables are moved, and she's just going at it. But he doesn't hear any sound from the vacuum. And there's no suctioning. But she's going at it. And he notices that the cord is not plugged into the wall. No power. How many times do we go through the motions? Powerless. Continue in prayer. And watch in the same. Please stand. I want us to pray. I'm not going to call you to altar today. If you don't know Jesus Christ as your Savior, He died for you. He paid ransom. He paid the ransom that was on our head. He paid the mortgage of damnation and eternal death. When He died on the cross, if you don't know Him, that's what the gospel is all about. The gospel is not fun and games. The gospel is not cunningness, cleverness, and underhandedness. The Jews, they seek signs. The Greeks, they seek wisdom. We give the Jews Christ, the stumbling block, and the Greeks, the gospel, which is foolishness. That's what it's all about. And so I want us to pray for one thing, all of us. All of us. Together we're going to pray that God would give us the desire to pray. Because I can't even do that. Because my sinful nature and the remaining fallenness in me from Adam's sin, and although I am redeemed and saved, I drag around this body that has its lusts, that has its pride. I drag it around, and so do you. And one of my first words after I say to God, you know, I tell Him, God, thank you for giving me the desire, because I didn't have it. I want to sleep with the three. I want to stay. My eyes are heavy. I've got things to do and places to go. I don't have time. I commute, I work, kids, baseball, volleyball. And we're going to pray right now, and I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, bow your heads if you want to lift your hands, and just let's all pray. God, you are the one who puts the to will and to do. You give me the desire and you give me the power. Give me this week, give me this week a desire to talk to you, to pray, to continue in prayer, watching the same. Lord, if I can't give you more, I'll give you what I can. I want to talk to you.